Memories of Edamame. I am going to describe an event that really happened to me when I was in elementary school, based on my memory and what I heard from my family. I think it was about 35 years ago. As an elementary school student at the time, I was growing plants such as morning glories and sunflowers as part of my schoolwork, and I took great care of them, watering them every day. I was moved and delighted by the sight of the plants growing so fast. After a while, summer vacation came, and the morning glories and sunflowers bloomed beautifully, and my classmates were smiling and smiling. However, as an elementary school student, I began to think less about the blooming plants and more about where I would go with my friends during summer vacation, or the day I would visit my grandfather's house, and my memories of those days gradually faded. Time flew by, and one day, as summer vacation came to an end, I decided to go visit a friend in the neighborhood, and as I came up to the bicycle stand in the garage, I noticed an object making its presence known to my eyes. A few small skin-colored peas were lying on the side of my bike, as if to say, "Look at them." At the time, I was so eager to play with my friend that I let the bean grains pass by, but my friend, who is a farmer's kid, bragged to me about the edamame that was served for dinner the night before, and I began to wonder if those bean grains might have been edamame. After partying with my friends after 6 p.m., I returned home and decided to ask my parents about the bean grains. They told me that they were edamame that our neighbor had been growing around July and had been given to us as a gift when the harvest season arrived. Come to think of it, sometimes I remember my father eating edamame while drinking beer and watching TV. At that time, I begged him, "I want edamame too." I remember begging him, "I want to eat edamame, too." But he firmly refused, saying, "No, this is for eating with alcohol." My friends ate a lot of delicious edamame for dinner, but I was not allowed to eat even a single one. My father is always the only one who eats them. Why am I so different from my friends? I want to eat edamame, too. Oh, that's right. There was a bean drop in the garage. Let's plant that thing. Let's do that. The thought came to me, and I remembered that there was a space in one corner of the garden where I could just plant something, so I decided to plant some peas there. With a shovel in hand, I tilled the soil and tried to make it look like a field. I planted the beans one by one where I thought it would look something like this. I fill a jar full of water and pour it over the planted area. My heart was filled with excitement. It reminded me of the morning glories and sunflowers I used to grow at school. If I took good care of them every day, these edamame would surely grow and produce beans. With this expectation, I diligently watered and weeded every day. At first, my parents treated it lightly, telling me that it would never sprout, that I should stop, and that it was a waste of time, but after a few days, a tiny sprout appeared on the surface of the soil. I was overjoyed and took care of it every day, and my parents also cheered me up, thinking that as long as it sprouted, it might grow. Eventually, my neighbors came to know that I was growing edamame, some cheering me on and some teasing me, but I didn't care what they said. Especially the head priest of the nearby temple, who also looked at me with a smiling face. The edamame grew steadily, and finally it was time to harvest. Then one day, a typhoon hit the village. A typhoon hit the village. I was worried about my edamame, but the wind and rain were so strong that I was told not to go outside my house. The house was rattling and shaking so loudly that the windows were almost shattered. Would edamame endure such a situation? That night, I was worried about my edamame, but I couldn't do anything about it and spent a sleepless night. The next morning, I went to the edamame with trepidation, only to find that every single edamame was gone. Oh, no. My edamame is gone. How could it be? I tried my best to explain to my parents, half crying, that my edamame had disappeared. My parents furrowed their brows and said, "You know, yesterday's typhoon hit our area. You know, yesterday's typhoon was terrible, wasn't it? Maybe the storm blew them away somewhere." The typhoon is strong enough to crush even houses, so it's no wonder the edamame went missing. Even though he said that, I was not convinced. I was sad. I had been taking such good care of my edamame. My edamame, where on earth have they gone? I was depressed for several days. The priest of the temple knew I was depressed and brought me some boiled edamame. My parents thanked him and I put the edamame in my mouth while suppressing my sadness. Delicious. If only I had harvested edamame earlier, I could have eaten them. Years later, as a junior high school student, I suddenly remembered those edamame when edamame soup was served for dinner. I asked my mother, "Do you remember growing edamame when I was in elementary school?" My mother replies, "Of course I remember." After a while, my mother looked like she wanted to say something. She said, "Maybe it's time I told you." I heard this story from one of our neighbors. My mother began to talk quietly. Time goes back to when I was in elementary school growing edamame. At that time, I was so engrossed in edamame that I was unaware that something a little unusual was happening around me, but I heard that there was a certain person who was glaring at my edamame with a grudging look, and there was also someone who was looking at him with pity. He said, "You know, her edamame fields don't sprout anyway. Why would they sprout? Why does he have to take such good care of it every day? Why are you all rooting for her? Edamame will just die out. Why won't it die? Why can't it just die? Oh, the weather forecasts said a typhoon was coming. Let's blame it on the typhoon and pull out the edamame and throw them away." On a dimly lit evening as a typhoon was approaching, the person who was staring resentfully at the edamame pulled them all out and threw them into a nearby river in the confusion of the situation. And the person who had repeatedly tried to stop the outburst was the abbot of a nearby temple. I had heard that the abbot had been a psychic since childhood, and that he was sensitive to the ill will of others. Perhaps he had noticed the malicious intent of the person who was after my edamame. Whenever he sensed a bad sign, he would keep an eye on the area around my house as if to make sure that he did not harass my fields, but as expected, he was unable to stop the culprit from committing the crime because he was worried about the temple only on the typhoon day. Why won't it die? Why can't it just die? Oh, the weather forecasts said a typhoon was coming. Let's blame it on the typhoon and pull out the edamame and throw them away. On a dimly lit evening as a typhoon was approaching, the person who was staring resentfully at the edamame pulled them all out and threw them into a nearby river in the confusion of the situation. And the person who had repeatedly tried to stop the outburst was the abbot of a nearby temple. I had heard that the abbot had been a psychic since childhood, and that he was sensitive to the ill will of others. Perhaps he had noticed the malicious intent of the person who was after my edamame. Whenever he sensed a bad sign, he would keep an eye on the area around my house as if to make sure that he did not harass my fields, but as expected, he was unable to stop the culprit from committing the crime because he was worried about the temple only on the typhoon day. My mother told me the truth. The priest took pity on me and asked his wife to boil edamame and bring them to my house. Oh, so that's why those edamame were gone. I was not angry or sad because it had been many years, but I was more curious about who hated edamame so much, so I asked my mother, but she only told me that it was an upper-class-man in the neighborhood. By the way, what happened to that upper-class-man? He suffered some terrible phenomenon that he had to ask for help from the temple's priest. No one could tell me what on earth kind of punishment he received. Perhaps the life that resides in the edamame is complaining about it in the dreams of the upperclassmen. This is the end of this story. Thank you for listening to the end.